Welcome. You're listening to the Leading Go Podcast. My name is VJ Williams, here with my friend and Pastor Kevin Check. Thank you for joining us, taking time out of your day to become a better leader. If you're new, we release a new episode every Wednesday. We would love for you to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Also, rate and review on Apple Podcasts. You won't believe how that helps. Get this podcast in the hands of so many more leaders just like you. And share this with a friend on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Man, I am excited about this episode.
Me too, man.
There is so many things to talk about, but before we get started, I just want to say welcome all of our friends in Dallas.
The 214.
The 214.
Let's go.
This just happens to be episode 214. So the title today, you have called this Deciding.
We do need to share, before we get there.
Cliffhanger.
That there apparently is no rhyme or reason to how area codes were decided upon.
Okay, that's right. So
Yeah.
if you've been following along for 2 episodes.
Our producer,
Yes.
Matt Dees.
Yep.
Dropped this knowledge on us.
Yes, he did.
That apparently it was people called operators who connected them to different area codes.
I can just picture the people going,
yeah,
212, 213,
there you
213,
go.
214, 214, 755. I can't find it. Where's it at?
So what they did is they just made the most common area codes, the first ones that were the easiest to punch in.
Yeah.
So that's why Manhattan is the 212 and LA is the 213 and Dallas is the 214.
So we're from Ohio.
Next episode, we're talking to Philadelphia, the 215.
You already looked at it. Huh?
Yeah.
So stay tuned, Philly fans.
I hope that this
Shout
knowledge...
out my friend Cody from Fairview
Village. Yeah.
Cody. Yeah. Hey, Cody.
I hope this knowledge never
That's
escapes me, and that as we keep going through it, us and all our podcast community just remember the area codes for all these places.
I know, but we are just
that's great knowledge.
Take this
to have.
a little bit further because we're already now 3 minutes in.
We have wasted 2 minutes.
Yeah, we're from Ohio, and it was 513.
Yeah,
and they moved it to 937.
Well, no, 513 Cincinnati. So it was all 513.
It was all 513.
And then as they had more phones, they split it. So Cincinnati got the 513.
Is it still 513 in Cincinnati?
Yeah.
What's your area code?
Well, I am Maysville, Kentucky, is when I got my first cell phone.
What's the Maysville, Kentucky
When I got my first cell phone.
I got it.
So I'm a 606.
Wait, you didn't have a cell phone in college?
No. I was on my parents'.
You want to talk about that?
No, I was on my, most people were
most people.
It feels weird for me to say it now. I feel like I'm being accused.
I mean, you can't make you feel anything. You kind of make a decision for yourself over there.
I choose to feel fine.
There you go. 214 Dallas, deciding what matters most.
Yeah, so.
This is exciting.
Now that we've wasted 3 minutes, let's talk about priority.
There we go.
So, first I just want to just communicate that one of the most important roles of a leader is to establish priority. Yes. Within the massive flow of work of what's going on, right? Yep, is to say this is actually what matters most.
Yeah.
And in the midst of a crazy season, one of the things you've been doing great is when our team has been meeting, you've made sure you've ended each meeting. I'm like, anybody got anything else? And you're like, yeah. What's the priority?
Yeah.
Because what that does for me is it forces me to be able to say, this is the thing. In the midst of all the stuff, some stuff might not get done. And this is the stuff that is not okay to not get done.
Yeah.
And this is the stuff, it's okay.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get done.
We can put a number of labels. Everything can be important. Not everything matters most.
Absolutely. And so just within that sense of priority, part of this is I just want to communicate to people just to give them some helpful tools and some way of thinking.
That's great.
And the thing I really want to get to at the end is I've got 2 questions that I think are a little different than most people look at on how to actually establish, hey, this is the priority.
Love questions at the end.
So yeah, you do so much.
People want them, man. They want the questions.
So first is one of the ways that, let me just give a little more background, is I believe the management question is what needs to get done. The leadership question is what matters most or what is the priority. So just hopefully people can see the distinction between their roles on that. The role of the manager is to go, here's all the tasks, here's all the things we got to get done. And we've talked many times before, too often people belittle management. Like, management matters.
Yeah.
Like, you actually spend a majority of your time, even as a leader, as a manager, which is perfectly acceptable. The people who say otherwise, the people who say it's all leadership, it's not management, like, what they may be trying to communicate is the importance of leadership in comparison to management.
Maybe that's what they're communicating.
Maybe. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, right.
I don't think those people actually lead organizations. I think they just write books or give talks.
I would agree.
Cool. So, but to say that as the management question is what all needs to get done.
Yeah.
Then the leadership question, which can only come out of that, is what is the priority?
Yeah.
What is the thing that absolutely has to get done? And one of the ways you can do that is through a rhythm of establishing priority. So our rhythm that we've shared before is we'll get away 3 or 4 times a year and do an offsite with a chunk of our team. And the outcome of the offsite is the answer to the question, well, one thing, if most significantly improved, would make the greatest impact to our organization. Is we want to define in advance, this is what we've got to do. This is absolutely what matters most. It is not what is most important.
Yeah.
Because that's the difference.
Yep.
Because if you start getting with a group of people who each have their own department, and you say, what's most important?
My thing.
Yeah.
Always.
Absolutely.
As it should be.
And yeah, we're thrilled.
In that moment.
Like, I don't want you to think someone else's area is way more important than your area.
Right. Until you understand the whole,
And so the question is very important. It comes out of the 4 disciplines of execution. What one thing, if most significantly improved, would make the greatest impact?
Yeah.
But the key piece of that is that we actually have a rhythm, a cadence for establishing as a team what is the priority.
Yeah.
That it's not just always me going, here's the priority, which does happen sometimes, but within that, people are able to give voice to it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's true. It's yearly, quarterly, weekly. I mean, the rhythms are standard.
Yep. So that's one way. Another way of establishing priority is an old tool. And so someone may have to look it up to be able to, like, there's better explanations than what I'm going to give. But Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants. So the 4 quadrants has on the one axis, this is urgent and not urgent. And on the other axis has this is important and this is not important.
Yeah.
So it creates just this little 2x2 grid with 4 squares. And his point on there is how he defines it is everything falls into grid 1, which is the box that is defined as this is urgent and important.
Everything.
This is pressing and it's significant.
Yes.
And his way of just speaking on it is he said, absolutely, you have to get that stuff done. But the really important work is the work that falls into the important and the non-urgent category.
Yeah.
Because if you can see that it's important without it even being urgent, that shows the significance. And that's the stuff that if you can get some time chunked aside to work on is really going to move you faster than anyone else.
That's good.
So it's a matter of like you triage what is urgent and important.
The word I was just getting ready to talk about. It's like the ER has to be really good at this.
Yes.
Or they're not going to be around very long.
Yes.
Like at the most intense levels.
Yeah. So you triage what is urgent and important. You need to work on, set aside time to work on what is urgent or what is non-urgent and important. I'm afraid I'm confusing everyone with our language.
Yeah.
When you get into what is urgent and not important, you delegate it.
Right.
And what is not urgent and not important, you discard it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you don't need to mess with it in your life.
Yeah.
So that's just a helpful tool. So like as you're looking through this, you go, okay, so how would I use that tool? You actually write out the grid and then you place your tasks and projects in that grid.
Right.
And then you go through that first grid and you're going, okay, let's prioritize it. Let's see what absolutely needs to get done this week. You need to set aside time every week for that second quadrant. Just go, hey, I know like part of mine is like, hey, thinking in advance and prepping out sermons well in advance. So I'm giving our team time, not just week of.
Right.
I've got to chunk out time. So I go like a lot of that's Wednesday morning. A lot of it's sometime when I'm like off flying, stuff like that. I go, hey, I'm going to set aside this time. Man, flying, I've just read like is the best time to work on non-urgent and important work. Because I'm not paying for Wi-Fi. I'm not getting onto all that. So I got like 2 hours.
Yeah, you're not paying for it.
I'm not paying for that.
No way. You should get the all-you-can-fly pass and just fly from airports to airports and do that as your whole year.
This would be like
you would. you would be like 6
I
years
would
out.
crush it. I would crush it. It's so good.
You just, where are you going today? I don't know. To this airport and back.
What's Kevin doing today? He's flying to Dallas to the 214.
Yeah, and back to Tampa.
Yeah, why? Well, no.
He gets a lot of work done. But no, that's exactly right. Those rhythms are important.
So those are some of the tools. But these are the questions that I want to get to, okay? That will maybe help shape how people focus. I want to give you both questions in advance, and then we can just break it down and see where we go from there. So the questions to help you decide what matters most is, the first one is identify what has the biggest payoff, not the biggest pain. And the second question is you need to identify what is common, not just localized. So break these down. First one, identify what has the biggest payoff. So we always overstate the impact of nuisances, annoyances, or anything we would describe as pain organizationally.
Always.
Yeah, if something isn't like properly planned out, if my name wasn't assigned to a task, if this wasn't as clear as I thought it should be. Like, the tendency people have is that, like, we talk about intensity of language. Like, if there's nothing that's a pain point that's a 10, we'll find a way to make something a 10. It makes me laugh more than anything else. Like, something always has to be the biggest deal, even if it's not a big deal. And so the tendency we have is we overstate or we overemphasize the things that are frustrating, the things that are aggravating, the things that are annoying. And in so doing, we undervalue the things that are impactful and the opportunities that are taking place. And so your tendency, just to know in advance, is to be drawn towards the thing that is frustrating instead of the thing that is impactful. And so is just kind of like slightly a different way of stating that first question of like, hey, what one thing if most significantly improved? It could be a -4, it could be a 0, or it could be a 2 right now. But you need to figure out what is the thing that has the biggest payoff if we apply our work and our effort to it.
Let's stay there for a second.
Cool.
Because I think this one hits so many organizations and churches and
everything.
I mean, we could go to the practical. I think it's just a mindset shift really at the end of the day, because anytime, especially when you haven't done the thing before, you don't understand everything that's involved. You start placating in your mind. Oh, I've got to make sure this happens. I've never done that before. I don't even know what that means. This. And by the time you've actually even thought about the objective, it's all about task and not the actual outcome that you're seeking. You gave us a way to think about what's important, what's most important with the quadrants.
Yeah.
What's a way practically that we can start changing the way we think about not directly going to what you say, the pain over the, what was the word you used?
Versus the payoff.
The payoff.
Yeah.
We need to go payoff first.
Yep.
And then reverse engineer it.
So I think the easiest way to do it is, let's just create this as a really simple activity. Future state. What's the future state?
Yeah.
If I work on this, 6 months from now, a year from now, the future state. If I solve this template that my task name wasn't put on, now my name's put on it.
Yeah.
Very minimal. So you go like, okay, that's important, but how much time is it taking you to figure that out? That's maybe a poor example.
Yeah.
My point is just like all the like annoyances, all the this stuff. Like, we feel like those, because they're pressing, need to be solved now. And then if we'd actually go future state, the reality is a lot of those still exist.
Yeah.
This is like, it's just how it is. And to be able to go future state, if I work on this, if I devote 8 hours to this, what's the impact a month from now, a year from now? I think we need to future state. I think we need to future state all of our work. If I could just say, it may sound like really weird, like a weird activity. One of the things I do when I write a message is, before I write the message, I write the outcome. Like, once I get a grasp of what the message is, I'm locked in on, this is the impact that I think this should have. And that way, that keeps me from writing it just to get it done, or to make it fun or any other thing. I want to acknowledge this is the enduring impact that this should have. And now I know how to operate differently, and now I apply myself differently.
That's interesting because it almost works hand in hand with you ask the question, what significant thing, if we do, improves versus what's the actual outcome that I want? Like,
yes.
But we always ask the question before we do the outcome. Should we reverse engineer that and say, this is what I want to see?
Well,
and then ask the question of how.
Yeah. So the way, if I could just give like the practical way with it, we have that built into our rhythm already, is before, when we do offsites and stuff, before we decide the one thing, we read the vision.
Yeah.
What we're doing in that is we're future stating ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that way we're naturally going to be turned aside from anything that doesn't lead to that.
That's good.
Because we know it doesn't matter
That's
as much.
good. I think that's important for this conversation so people know what the target is.
Yeah. So that's first question.
Yep.
Identify what has the biggest payoff, not the biggest pain, because unless if it's a massive pain point, it probably shouldn't be the priority. The second one is this, is you need to identify what is common and not just what is localized. And here's my hope in there is within both, within both, there's a tendency as a leader to overemphasize your personal experience.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of the impact on the totality of the team and the organization and the community and the world. And I could just keep going on forever. But like we have a tendency, even when we're talking about the work that has an impact, we overemphasize our personal perspective on it.
Yeah.
And so like, if it only has a payoff, so you may view it as like, for me, this has the biggest payoff. But if you're the only one who has a payoff in it, it's probably not the most important thing. And so you need to identify the things that need worked on that are common across the organization. This is not necessarily always the case. The thing that I'm after in here is that people don't look at things purely that their perspective is the most important in this.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to make the decision, but you need to be aware of what's impacting everyone in order to be able to decide what is the priority.
That's good. So you're using the language common as organizational awareness.
Yeah. I believe that you should define priority as a team, almost never as an individual.
Got it.
And the decision may be yours, but you cannot have that conversation in isolation because your perspective is not broad enough.
That's good. That's really good. And you already have established the rhythms for that. Is there any more that you want to add to how you actually accomplish that? Because most people, especially, I don't want to talk about churches right now. I want to talk about organizations. They're so isolated from everything else.
Yeah.
That they feel as though they're the only ones that would know how to accomplish something in that.
Ain't that the truth?
So how do they, start to say, hey, is it just an exercise of getting people together and saying, tell me what you think?
This is where it's probably really hard.
Yeah.
Is yes, it's an exercise, but before it's an exercise, it's a virtue and a value.
There you go.
It's a virtue of humility and a value of other people's perspective. And so like you can do the exercise of get people in the room, but if that virtue and value aren't there, then it's not going to breed any results.
Yeah.
And if you actually already have, if you're humble and if you're valuing other people's perspective, then the exercise, I don't mean this as a negative. People are going to cringe when I say this. It's almost a formality. And I don't mean that as you've already pre-decided what it is.
Yeah, no.
But your like ears are attuned enough that you kind of know. It's one of the things that makes me laugh is people say like, oh, the economy is doing terrible. When like sometimes it is. But other times the economy is doing terrible in your field.
Right.
But if the economy is doing bad in your business, to you, the entire economy is doing terrible.
And just to give an analogy for that, and this will cringe a lot of people, but I had a buddy back in the day when gas prices were like $5 a gallon. He's like, I'm loving every bit of this. Yes. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like it's costing, I'm driving an hour and a half one way.
Yeah.
I'm like, and from his perspective, all of his stock was in oil companies. So like he was crushing it. And so I know that's not helpful for but the concept is you better see the other side of the aisle.
Our tendency is we universalize our localized experience.
Yeah.
So the thing that I experienced personally, we assume everyone else is also experiencing. My only point on the economy is just to go like, that's not the case.
Yes.
And so you need to be aware of what's going on broadly if you're going to make a decision of what's a priority.
That's good. 214. What matters most? Can I just say this real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
It's so, and I know I don't want to say all the episodes always lead down to the same thing because it's not true, and there's a lot of nuance in every episode. But it's so clear that when we do have these talks that we're having in this podcast over 214 episodes, both of those underlying questions, one got back to vision and one got back to values.
Yeah.
And how important that we stick to whatever we've written on paper.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Or at least evolve it to whatever it needs to be over time. But how important those are on papers and walls are eventually written on your heart.
Yep.
Because if they're not, you can't be successful. And this
Absolutely.
is just another, how can you know what matters most if you don't have vision and values?
Yep.
So good. All right. Great. That's the end of this. Thank you for joining us, taking time out of your day to become a better leader. If you're new to the podcast or haven't yet subscribed, she's not understanding. If you're new to the podcast or haven't yet subscribed, it'd mean the world to us if you did that now. So post about it, rate and review, or both. You won't believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of so many more leaders just like you, trying to get better like us. I love hearing your stories of how the podcast is working in your life and business. If you have a story, visit leadinghope.online or DM us. And we are so excited to hear from you. And remember, everyone has 20 minutes to learn to become a better leader. Make it count.
Woo!